convo is right. So the convo is like, is Congress really just like politically motivated like by Trump instead of like actually
That sounds interesting.
like a clearly no, they're right. I think he's gonna be on the I don't think the Danish was yesterday. The Danish was
Pretty well. I'm very cold. I was home last weekend. It was like 70.
Oh yeah. That was so
Should have been to the other side.
Yeah, I wanted to leave Texas.
Yeah, like first last.
Oh, yeah.
Should have been on the other
Welcome to today's Institute of Politics Speaker Series event. Is Congress Obsolete? My name is Carter Heron, and I'm a first year from Morgantown, West Virginia, majoring in Environment, Geography, and Urbanization. I'm a voting ambassador for UChai Votes and an event ambassador with the Institute of Politics. Our first speaker today is current Pritzker Fellow Gerardo Bonilla Chavez. He has served in a variety of positions in government, including as a special assistant in the Department of Commerce and senior policy advisor to both the Joint Economic Committee and the House Committee on Small Business. Most recently, he served as legislative director and chief of staff to Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Representative Patrick McHenry has served in the House since 2005, representing North Carolina's 10th Congressional District. He is currently the chair of the House Financial Services Committee. Prior to being elected to Congress, Representative McHenry represented the 109th District in the North Carolina House of Representatives. Manu Raju is the chief congressional correspondent for CNN. He has worked for The Hill, Politico, and a variety of other news outlets. He currently hosts CNN's Inside Politics on Sundays. This event will be moderated by Jennifer Steinhauer, the Senior Director for Speaker Series and Pritzker Fellows at the IOP. She has served as a reporter for the New York Times, mainly covering New York City Hall, Los Angeles, and the US Congress. Now for some quick reminders. Remember to silence your cell phones. Please raise your hand and remain seated when it is time for Q&A. And as always, students are prioritized. Since you're here today, you probably want to attend more IOP Speaker Series events, such as Immigration and Asylum, Opposing Views on Monday, February 26th at 5:30 in the Ida Noyes Cloister Club, and Jane Fonda Talks Intergenerational Climate Action on Monday, March 4th at 5:30 in University Room AB at the Rubenstein Forum. You can find all future events by visiting politics.uchicago.edu. Let's give a warm welcome to Gerardo Bonilla Chavez, Congressman Patrick McHenry, Manu Raju, and Jennifer Steinhauer.
This is, as you know, what we call an IOP pop-up event. These are events that we stand up quickly off the news on short notice, so it's great to see such a packed room here. These are hour-long events. We do prioritize able to ask questions, so we'll leave plenty of time for that. And as he said, we will prioritize students when we do go to the Q&A portion. Thanks everyone for being here. Manu, it's great to see you. I've been seeing you for quite a while. Congressman, thank you so much for joining us. And Gerardo, who's a fellow this quarter, thanks for being here. So we asked the question, is Congress obsolete? And obviously that is an illegal question in the sense that that our Constitution has enshrined Congress as being responsible for, at the very least, keeping the government open, paying our bills. Congress can't be obsolete because if Congress is obsolete, I guess the United States is obsolete in a sense. But we do also see that they've been marginalized in a way in lawmaking between just the plethora of executive orders that we've seen over two administrations, the dysfunction from both parties, frankly, over lawmaking, obviously an erosion of public trust, myriad of other factors that we're going to look at today. Congress feels very marginalized. On the other hand, when has the Munich Security Conference ever had people running up to reporters asking them about discharge petitions? You know, so the world is looking at our Congress, but the United States, its citizens are looking at it with something other than perhaps admiration. So we've got a dichotomy here, lots of focus on our Congress, but lots of marginalization in the sense of its core functions, which is doing the law of the land. So one thing I want to look at is I want to go to each of you, starting with you, Manu, as someone who's covered Congress for 15 years at least. saying what your thoughts are about that dichotomy. And do you think this is a trajectory, or are we just in a weird moment in time?
Well, thanks for having me. It's great to see you again, Jen. And it's been I've been covering Congress for I've been covering Washington since 2002. Congress for about almost 20 of those 22 years. So I have witnessed how Congress has essentially devolved. It's almost like one majority tends to take the very bad habits of the previous majority and goes lower and lower until there is no bottom. The question is, have we reached the bottom, and will things start to eventually turn back around? And I think that's a question we don't have an answer to quite yet. Now, in this particular Congress has been incredibly unproductive, given the razor-thin majority in the House, the chaos within the House GOP conference, the aftermath of the unprecedented ouster of Kevin McCarthy, and just the inability to get major legislation done, or even just the basic essence of governing. We're heading into yet another government shutdown deadline on March 1st because Congress has already kicked the can down the road 3 times to extend government funding. Will they do it another time? That is a question. There are 2 deadlines coming up on March 1st and March 8th. And the big ticket item that they have done this Congress has been to avoid a national debt default, which Congressman McHenry was central in that negotiation. But that was really, that bill, the Fiscal Responsibility Act, was a product of intense negotiation on both sides to avoid a default, which is something that they should do to avoid an economic calamity. So that's kind of where we are now, let alone the major problems that are at the border, the $95 billion in aid to Ukraine, to Israel, to Taiwan, that passed the Senate, that is going nowhere in the House, and the deep divisions largely within the GOP over that particular issue or legislating in an election year has led to a point where in this particular Congress, nothing but the basic essence of governing can get accomplished. And it's a question of even if that can get done.
Great. And Congressman Henry, we're so honored you're here, not just because you are a member of the House, but you're someone who has been long considered a leader in your party. In terms of the trajectory of Congress, obviously when you first came in, you yourself were considered somewhat of a bomb thrower. I remember you and Tom Price would go down to the floor and kind of gum up the works, the good old days. And now you're considered an institutionalist. And so curious, is that an evolution inevitable? And how do you center yourself? We'll talk about it in a little bit, but I think one of the most iconic moments in this year in Congress was you throwing down the gavel after the vote to toss Kevin McCarthy to vacate the chair. And I don't see that just as a cool video moment, but it seemed to really encapsulate perhaps your journey on the Hill. So what is your view of the question that I just asked? Is this a trajectory? Is this a moment in time? Where do you kind of place your party and yourself in this?
Well, there's a lot to unpack there. First, I did keep the gavel. You got to have at least a little gear out of this stuff. And I didn't expect to be Speaker Pro Tem for 23 days in October. In fact, a year ago at this time, I did not know the Speaker Pro Tem position existed. Having served in the institution now, this is my 10th term and this is my 20th year. There are some quirks of this institution you still learn about on an ongoing basis. So let me just step back. So where the Congress I got elected to, you had multiple members, Democrat and Republican, get indicted and go directly from their congressional office or accepting a government check as a member of Congress to federal prison. They went from one term of office to a separate term. That was 2005. So to say that Congress is a shit show is accurate in any given decade for a period of time. You have every type of character that can be found in a truck stop can be found in the U.S. Congress, the U.S. House. I mean, we are much more like a truck stop. Everybody's welcome, and the weirder the better. But that's been since the beginning of time. I mean, Davy Crockett served in the U.S. House. I mean, we've had hell of characters that have been here. So, so the evolution of this and the time that we're in right now is, as Manu outlined, particularly chaotic and particularly bad. The first 10 months of this Congress, we got a lot done. And we got a lot done in legislative production that would be commensurate with a larger majority in the House. We didn't have a single failed rule in the first 10 months of this Congress. And in the last 5 months, we've had 5 failed rules. And I know you all know the nuances of House procedure, but that's a major deal. To lose a rule vote is a major deal. Much less to lose 5 is quite an historic number in a very bad way. So there are a couple of things. So I did start as a bomb thrower to go try to achieve a legislative goal. And when I recognized that outward act, whether it's seeking media attention, fundraising, all speeches, all that stuff, all the show that we think of as members of Congress, that was for a purpose. Now, I got too enamored with that in my first 2 terms, and I recognize that's not what I should be doing. I should be focused on the policy and driving policy outcomes. Public policy is my craft as a legislator. Legislation, oversight to change rules or make them better in the executive branch. Legislation to have a permanent mark in law for at least a period of time. Those are the things that you try to do. Those are the crafts of being a member of Congress, House, Senate, state legislature, whatever it may be. That is the craft. Those things that people get enamored with right now, social media publicity, going on Manu's show to talk about whatever the hell it is they think will light people up and make people mad, or drive fundraising, speech giving, and all that stuff. It's supposed to be for a purpose in public policy, not in and of itself. What we have now are social media stars seeking Congress as a platform for themselves. And in a weak party system, which we have been in progressively over the last 50 years, the parties have gotten weaker and weaker, but especially in the last 20 years. So now it's individual brands driving this and media attention around individual members for their own brand building rather than public policy. I think that shows that we're in a particularly bad moment, and Congress has to adapt to new rules, new terms of engagement with this new set of media environment that we're dealing with, and the new type of attention and the fact that the parties are weak. We have to change the structure of Congress to adapt to those things, but I think Congress can do it and must do it, and must reassert our authorities to do the things of governance that can be a check and balance on the other 2 pieces of government that's really important, that we have a strong legislative branch to ensure that they are checked, and that just as the founders intended. So I think there's a lot there. I don't think Congress is permanently broken, but I think we're in a pretty bad place right now. And it can get a lot worse. It can get a lot better. And the voters will have the final say of whether or not they like the dog food that we are currently serving them.
I want to get
dog food.
I want to get in the nitty gritty of some of the structures in a minute, but I first want to keep this in the political structure when I talk to you, G. But Mary, you'll have a chance to defend yourself as a key destroyer of Congress in a minute, and also to respond to both of our esteemed guests here. But I want to just pick up on a political thread before we get down to the structure. I think what he said is extremely important. I think a lot of people who follow Congress even lightly do agree with this concept, at least in some form of Congress having to change. But we're gonna. It's easy to pick on the Republicans right now. They're in charge of the House, and things have gone not that great. And Congressman, I think you had a comment today to a news anchor that I saw on Twitter about the Speaker and how he wasn't exactly the first pick, and he's a bit underwater. I think you saw with some anvils around his ankles or something along those lines. But let's look at your party too. And I would. obviously, people make comparisons with Squad when they first came in, very much in parallel with the congressman said about how you come in and try to throw bombs and try to work against leadership. And I would center this perhaps most famously on the infrastructure bill, which was blocked at one point to secure the passage of the Build Back Better bill, which obviously never did to come to fruition. And when it became clear that that bill wasn't going to pass the Senate, some Squad members voted against it, the infrastructure bill anyway, and it passed with the help of Republicans. And now you see some members, most notably Cori Bush, who's got a pretty tough primary challenger, having to explain their opposition to that bill, and it's not so easy, right? So that is a version of what we're talking about. So what do you think about, how would you respond through the political lens before we get into the structural lens of what's going on with Democrats in the context of what the congressman just laid out?
Yeah, well, thanks first and foremost for having me here. It's always great to be amongst the community and have these conversations. I think that similar to Republicans, Democrats have been in this inflection point, right? Trying to make a determination and kind of direct the party and direct the future of the party. What does and people like Cori Bush, people like my former boss, have entered this space to provide a new direction, a new party, really, and try to influence where we're going, right? And I think that's what a lot of the members that the Squad came into this Congress to try to influence the ultimate direction of this party and really reestablish what it means to be a Democrat, where try to identify what the soul of the Democratic Party is. Because I would argue that it has lost its way, right? Just the other day I was having dinner with some students, and they were a bit confused. They weren't sure what the Democratic Party is bringing to them, right? Or offering them or running on. Just anti-Trump was really the narrative, right? And I think that's a real inflection point for us to discuss and to actually outline what is the platform beyond Trump. What are we offering? How are we going to govern? And so yes, we are at an inflection point. I think both parties are, with new members of the caucus joining, with different outcomes. I think Mr. McHenry mentioned this. There are some that are there for bomb throwing. There's also new members that really want to expose what's happening in Congress, right, and inform us all of some of the wild stuff that happens on the day-to-day, right? And I think that is a major part of their role.
So Manu, you have here an esteemed member of the Republican Party. You have someone who's worked in the staff for Democratic members, including obviously someone who's sort of the titular head of the progressive side, if you will, AOC. They're kind of self-diagnosing. What do you think listening to them? Does that resonate with you? What do you think, again, as a reporter standing on the outside of all of this, talking to both sides all the time? How do you respond to that, besides the part that it's your fault?
Yeah, I mean, I think that look, there are a few different things here. There is the structural part of Congress, and one of the things that the congressman alluded to is the fact that this Congress, they've seen 5 rule votes go down, and of course that is significant because typically what would happen in the majoritarian institution like the House, the majority party passes the rule along party lines, the majority party carries it, the minority party votes against it, and then they could pass legislation on a majority vote. When the majority party is divided, as the House GOP has been, they can't move forward with their agenda on a party line basis anymore, and it forces them to try to pass legislation through by a 2/3 majority, 290 votes. And some may argue that's a good thing. That means you have to get Democratic support too. But then you run into the other institutional issue. Now, given the fact that for the first time ever in history, a speaker has been ousted by during the middle of the session by the motion to vacate, no speaker, currently not the current speaker, wants to go against his party in a situation that could cause him to lose his seat. So that is one institutional issue that is going to have to figure out how they're going to resolve that. But it is something that parties will continue to try to weaponize as they've seen. People have seen that been successful in this Congress. You look at the filibuster too in the Senate. filibusters used to not be done at all. It was actually pretty uncommon, including on judges. I mean, Clarence Thomas was confirmed by a Democratic majority in the Senate. He wasn't even filibustered, despite everything that happened with his confirmation hearings. That would be unthinkable in today's confirmation proceedings. And that's just one example of it. Both parties increasingly using the patterns, bad patterns of their other previous minority parties, have used the filibuster to try to stifle legislation. Now, you can argue the good side of that. That forces 60 votes in the United States Senate, forces consensus to try to actually pass legislation on a bipartisan basis. But when the two parties can't get 60 votes in a narrowly divided Senate, that stops legislation in its tracks. So you have the institutional problems. Then you have just the issues of the way the parties are right now. In the House, these districts are incredibly gerrymandered. There are very few districts that are actually can be flipped. Primaries loom so large in the House, and there's very little incentive to play to the middle when you could be vulnerable in a primary. So you add all those different factors together, and it makes legislating in both structurally and politically very difficult.
Yeah, well, I think we should talk about the filibuster. We should talk about gerrymandering. We should talk about other electoral reforms besides the ones that can happen institutionally in the Congress itself. But Congressman, let's still get focused on people for a second. McCarthy kind of made it clear that he thought this dysfunction can be addressed by rooting out its practitioners, right? He wants the ethics committee to end Matt Gaetz's career. He's recruited challengers to end his personal antagonists, such as Nancy Mace, South Carolina. What will come of those efforts? Is he right? Is dysfunction, again, driven by institutional problems, or is it the practitioners of dysfunction in your diagnosis?
Okay, so actually this would be a healthy dialogue, because why didn't the squad oust Nancy Pelosi when they had the similar power to take her out? And so because this shows the difference in motivation that I think is apparent, right? Which is, so in this setting, you had 8 members of the Republican conference side with all the Democrats, and I don't blame the Democrats. Democrat members of the House should vote for a Democrat speaker, all things being equal, because they want policies commensurate with their party. That's the reason why they're Democrats. So this question of partisanship, this I think is a misdiagnosis, right? I'm a conservative. I'm a Republican. If I were to say, like, I'm a conservative, do you think that's the Democrat Party is the right place for me? No one would think that's reasonable. If you're a progressive, likewise, you're likely not a Republican. So the motivation for those 8 members that voted to oust McCarthy, to diagnose a one-size-fits-all answer, you can't do. You simply cannot put that together. They all had separate motivations that are going to be borne out over time. Much of the motivation, though, was a political calculus that they could personally win and personally benefit. That's why you see the fundraising emails that went out by many of these players directly about their quote-unquote valiant stand, and 8 Republicans trying to raise money from conservatives by siding with all the Democrats is kind of a perplexing way to do it. But their motivation was personal political gain for one motivation or another, but that's what they were going for. The second element of that, with a couple of these, was their personal animus to Kevin McCarthy as a person. That too will come out over time, and I think the folks that hold those grudges are saying that. So I think the question of institutional reform is not around the people; it's around how you benefit. And a wide majority, when you have 2 or 3 jerks in your party, you can roll over them. When you have a narrow majority and you have a 2-vote majority and you have 5 jerks, they have power. And so they have managed group of Republicans have managed to make themselves relevant on the outside for fundraising, for the outside for social media clicks and followers, and then media attention. But it all goes back to the political power around political fundraising. So when we have weak political parties, which we have had as a result, they've been weakened because of McCain-Feingold. You then have the advent of super PACs to balance out that power. We have a set of perverse incentives that drive disagreement rather than unification. Because we lack collective power as Republicans or collective power as Democrats to have a more cohesive political agenda in the legislative branch. Additionally, over the last 50 years, our elections have become, I say 50 years, over the last 30 years, our elections have become more parliamentary in America, which means you go in, you vote for a Democrat at the top of the ballot, all the way to the bottom of the ballot, you're a Democrat. You call yourself an independent, you may say you're unaffiliated, you may say whatever, but when you go in, you're likely to vote one party top to bottom. That's not been the case. Our system was not designed around that structure. Our legislative system is not built around that. It is built around consensus-driven outcomes because of the House and Senate having separate motivations, the 60-vote threshold in the Senate. And so it's a compromised product in a divided government, or even in a unified government. There are massive compromises that have to take place. So there's some larger societal things that we're going to have to adapt to internally, but weakened parties is a huge part of the failure of our current political apparatus and in legislative power.
Now, I would like you to respond to that, and I do want to point out, sir, that I do remember when Nancy Pelosi first got the gavel back, that was not a cakewalk for her.
No. I will tell you how she handled those negotiations over 2 months, and how Speaker McCarthy handled his negotiations over 2 months and a week, because the last week was quite public. We're both great examples of consensus-driven politics within your party, and I think they're both political masterminds in their own right on how they handled that process. Now, the beauty was Pelosi did all of that behind closed doors, and McCarthy had to do the last week in public. But the outcome was a consensus-driven process within to unify the party for a period of time, at least.
And you want to respond to that?
Yeah, there's two things that I think are important. One piece that was mentioned is, and allude to there, is money in politics, right?
Money. Mm-hmm.
Money, right? I think that is a major factor that, I know it's on the electoral side, but has influence, right? It has influence on how we navigate these votes, or not navigate these votes, navigate our moves inside, right? The other piece and I will just plus up what the chairman said regarding the difference between McCarthy and Pelosi. I have to hand it to the former speaker. She knows how to build power, how to use power, and what the levers internally are, right? And how you build a coalition, a consensus coalition, how you have these conversations inside the family, so to speak, right? So to the point regarding supporting her for speaker, she was working the rooms, she was working these coalitions, right, to ensure that she would get this gavel. And I have to say, having worked on the inside, seeing it firsthand, I've never seen someone work so hard and know how to move, when to move, what buttons to push, right? And that, I think, is a big factor here. And maybe I'm being naive here, but my sense is that she's a powerhouse, right?
Yeah.
She knows.
There is only one Nancy Pelosi. I don't want to keep it just on personalities, but I want to get back to some of the actual legislative. But Matt, I would love to hear your response to that, because you've again.
I wanted to point out one thing that's difference between Pelosi and McCarthy is the fear that Pelosi would instill in her members that McCarthy simply couldn't, because some of those members, they don't care what the leadership says or does to them. And if the leadership were to do something to them on the far right, that actually they use that to their political advantage. And case in point, I mean, when people were threatening to knock Pelosi out of the speakership, she effectively knocked them off key committee assignments. Go talk to Kathleen Rice of New York for what happened to her. And then what does McCarthy have to do? He rewards some of these members with key committee assignments, the ones who are threatening to knock him out of the speakership. And it shows you just the difference in the two parties and the membership, and folks on the far left and the far right, and how they view the leadership and how they view their status as a potential pariah. Folks on the right are fine with being a pariah, and that makes it harder for the leadership, Republican leadership, to discipline that.
Is that a party thing, though? I mean, having a strong speaker, we have House buildings named after speakers for a reason, right? I mean, being a strong leader does go back and, it's something that's respected historically in both parties, right? I mean, again, is this just our moment in time? Is this, in that particular moment, was that about the man who is Kevin McCarthy, or you really think that is a statement about the current Republican Party?
I mean, I think since the Tea Party era, we have seen an influx of members within the GOP who are not beholden to the leadership. And I think, look, there's always been a faction within both parties, but within the GOP that doesn't care what the leadership says. But I think it's grown increasingly so since the 2010 election. And there is the members in the House Freedom Caucus. Many of them, enjoy being a constant thorn in the side of leadership. And I don't get the sense that the squad feels the same way about the Democratic leadership. Yes, they may make their points, but to completely derail their majority's agenda, maybe that'll change if they take the majority back and they've seen the way the Freedom Caucus uses their power. Again, what I said, majority party taking the bad habits of another majority party. Maybe they'll do it next time, but they haven't yet.
Well, then let's talk about the legislative part too, because Congressman, in the last Congress, the kind of, we talk about productivity, and it's true that there hasn't been nothing going on over there on the Hill for 5 years. I mean, the last Congress, the Senate forged these bipartisan bills to promote science and semiconductors, to fund the infrastructure, as we mentioned, begin to address some gun violence in a bipartisan manner, and it fell to the Democratic majority in the House to kind of rubber stamp those bills, and Republicans didn't really participate in that. Why was that? And is there any lesson from that past Congress, the last Congress, in terms of how the legislative branch can function?
Well, leadership matters. Look, the biggest agreement so far of this Congress was the debt ceiling, raising the debt ceiling. And the structure of that, the president said, I'm not going to negotiate. You're going to pass a clean debt ceiling. I'm not going to negotiate. And he said that for 4 months before sending negotiators to the Hill. And it was at the direct leadership of Speaker McCarthy, who said, no, we're going to have a negotiated deal here, and we will raise the debt ceiling and get a spending agreement as a result of it. We also got policy connected with it, regulatory policy changes, and I'm proud to be a part of being that team and on that team that negotiated that. But that was a major piece of legislation for 2023. That took sacrifice, that took political fortitude to go see that through. And that deal making happened in a Congress that's this one we're sitting in right now. And that was a House Speaker McCarthy driven negotiation. And he finally got the president to send a team to negotiate. And so the speaker and the president got the deal, and the Senate watched. So it can happen, and it can happen. And I think we could be on the precipice of actually the second piece of legislation that's of significance for this Congress, maybe the third, after the NDAA, which will be the spending agreement, executing the spending agreement that we got as a result of the debt ceiling. Now, part of that is executing around the top line we negotiated in the debt ceiling, yes. But it's a substantial piece of legislation to get done in a really divided Congress. So yes, it can happen. big things still happen. In 2017, we had Tax Cuts and Jobs Act passed. We had major pieces of legislation, much of which was bipartisan, get signed into. We had in the first year of the Biden presidency, substantial pieces of legislation make its way into law. So yes, I mean, things can still get done, but it takes leadership to go execute on that and the fortitude to go see it through.
So let's talk a little bit about these structural solutions. And I would just be curious, and I'll start with you, Gene. What do you think? I mean, the usual stuff comes up, right? End the filibuster. We should do election reform, specifically around gerrymandering and the way we form our congressional districts. I mean, is that where you're at, or what do you think? And what does your party you think, generally speaking? I know it's a big party, you know, but what are some of the things that you hear people say to institutionally change the way Congress works?
Yeah, I think gerrymandering is definitely top up there, you know, top of mind. That who we actually send to Congress and are those individuals actually representative of the district, right? Top of mind, there's also a lot of reforms that were outlined in the Modernization Committee that I think are important, that will make Congress more efficient. You know, there are components of Congress that I don't think people really know, like, you know, having a centralized HR system, for example, that is very like in the weeds, but those sort of reforms of the institution to make it run better are actually very much needed. You know, I think the other thing that you know you would hear from my party is removing the money out of politics. I think that's a real big issue. I think that many progressives would love, and others in the party would like to address that. It has a terrible influence on the outcome of who we actually send to Congress and what things that get done there. So those are just like some of the top lines I would say, but you know, gerrymandering, of course, getting the money out of politics, and then implementing some of the reforms of the Modernization Committee.
Congressman, does that resonate with you, or do you have your own thoughts on that?
Well, look, I live in a state that was gerrymandered by Democrats for generations. I live in the state of North Carolina that elected Republicans to the presidency, but had between 70 and 80% of our congressional delegation being represented by Democrats. So gerrymandering is not a new thing. Elbridge Gerry has been dead for 200 years. Right? So the idea that it has this malign influence on modern politics, I think, is something latched upon as you know, just trying to give people some salve for the fact that America is divided. We are narrowly divided in this country. And look at the last presidential election, look at the presidential election before that. Those were close elections. And I think our divide in this country is because we're truly divided about a substantial number of public policy issues. We're living in a time of massive technological change and economic change. Public safety is a major issue. We have major debates that are complicated on immigration, complicated on major issues of how people live and work and want to you know, spend their lives. So there's a lot of upheaval, and the politics rides upon what the people think about and care about. That really is a resident is a thing that speaks to me most deeply, is the fact that, you know, just go talk to average Americans about these issues, and they live much more very much more nuanced life than I think our politics show, and aren't certain about or aren't firmly decided about which way to go in these uncertain times. So, but getting back to the structural questions, the incentives for politicians drive outcomes. If the incentive is you become famous because you say fruitcake things all over the internet, and that gives you political power, you're going to get more fruitcake saying more insane things. And that is not a knock on the left, the progressive left, or the squad. It's not a knock perfectly on the right either. This is the incentive structure of our politics is driving the behavior of politicians. And you're seeing it in both parties. And you're seeing it not really aligned with ideology, frankly, but the executioners of this, that know how to precisely go push buttons on big issues. You have others that pretend to that so that they have political power, and they're doing that out of fear or avarice. And there are a couple of folks that are driving policy and also are driving internet traffic. They're raising money and all that stuff around policy and outcomes. And then you have a bunch of other people that are doing it because it's a right hit for them. The dopamine hit or the fundraising hit or the attention hit that they really desire, not for some policy outcome. And that's what I object to.
And Manu, I'm not going to ask you to like comment on filibuster reform because that's not your remit as per se. But how do these comments resonate with you in terms of sitting where you are in the media, which of course has taken a lot of its own pot shots, right, in the context of this conversation. And again, as someone who started out in your career with a different type of media structure and perhaps therefore incentive structure per what he was just saying, what do you think reflecting on these comments?
Yeah, one of the things that's been so noticeable in my time covering the Hill is the shrinking middle of the House and the Senate. I mean, the blue dogs in the House, they've been essentially wiped out. There are still some true moderate Democrats. There aren't as many as there used to be. The Northeastern Republicans in the Senate essentially wiped out and absent really Susan Collins. And this election cycle, in each successive election cycle, increasingly wiping out the middle of the respective caucuses, and you're going to probably see that here again in the Senate. Joe Manchin announced he was going to retire. He's going to retire, and Republicans are going to pick up that seat. Now we'll see. Jim Justice, who's favored to take that seat on the Republican side, he used to be a Democrat, so maybe he'll legislate as a moderate Republican. We'll see. Or maybe he'll be party line and conservative when he gets to the Senate. Kirsten Sinema, we'll see if she decides to run again. Even if she does run as a third-party candidate, she has a very difficult time winning. She is facing a very conservative member, Carrie Lake, in the Senate for the Senate seat, or a very progressive member, Ruben Gallego. That will undoubtedly have an impact. Sinema has been central to a lot of these key negotiations, including over the border security deal that failed to get past the Senate. That has been a clear trend over the last many years, last couple of decades. And some may argue that's a good thing because they think centrist policies are weak, watered down, milquetoast, don't really amount to much. Others may argue that's a bad thing because we lose that incremental progress, which is better than no progress at all. But it undoubtedly has had an impact on the institution.
Yeah, that's interesting. You talk about these people in the middle who have been at the center of deals so much. I'm going to give the last 14 minutes over to questions, except for one more for you, Congressman, from me. Students first, obviously, so start raising your hand, thinking of your question. I want to end up with you, with my Q&A portion, addressing the leadership issue that you brought up a lot. Again, we saw you throw the gavel down. We would all love to know what precisely sentence was in your brain when you did that. Outside of the extra security and extra donuts you may have gotten in the pro tem role, I guess a lot of us wonder why you didn't throw your hat in the ring for speaker at that moment, given, as you have identified yourself, the importance of leadership in pulling your party and Congress out of this quagmire.
Well, that precise moment was pure anger. Kevin McCarthy's my friend, and he had a successful 10 months, and taking him out was not commensurate with how he performed as speaker, I believe. So that was a moment where it really hit me what just happened. Why I didn't pursue the speakership? Well, I made the firm decision in the first night. The first night I was speaker pro tem. I usually sleep, but the first night I couldn't sleep. Really couldn't sleep. And I got just a little bit of sleep opened my eyes and I realized the only way I can succeed and the best thing I can do for the Congress, for my party, for Congress, for this institution of government is to want nothing, to pursue nothing, to want nothing. And if I am in that position of without a desire for any outcome other than just being fair and how I handle this, then I can get through this. I can get through this and we'll be better off. The Republican Party might be a little bit better off with the outcome. The Congress might be a little bit better off. But to take myself out of this and just to follow what I think is my conscience and what I believe to be firmly right and follow that. And it was, everybody tried every potential way to get me engaged for something personal for me. And I said no. There are moments where you have to step in and take the mantle of leadership. And there are moments where you have to surrender your desires for the common good. And I think that was a moment I had to let go. And I think we got a better result in coming out of that. In the weeks after that, I think we got a better result because I did that. But again, something I'll think about for a number of probably decades to come.
Yeah, and history will decide whether this speaker is going to be a better outcome for the House than you are, sir. So go ahead. Why don't we start here? Identify yourself, please, so our esteemed speakers can hear you by your affiliation and your year.
Okay, yeah. Thank you for speaking with us today. I'm Robbie. I'm a first year at the college. So this is kind of really for Chairman McHenry, but did you ever think it was in the best interest of the country in the last year to either create some sort of power sharing agreement with the Democrats or to work with Democrats, then rather cave to the crazies in your party like Matt Gaetz? I know I might be naive, but it just, from the outsider perspective, it might seem like a better option for the country, considering you also we have a Democrat Senate and a Democrat president, where it's like, if you're caving to the crazies in your party, anything you pass is not really gonna end up in law. But yeah, that's my question. I'm
not sure, frankly. Really, there's a lot of debate, and it's really sort of a cost-benefit analysis, really, of engaging with one group or another group, and it's what you have to sacrifice in public policy, what you have to sacrifice in the outcome on whether or not it makes sense. And I've had that firm debate and discussed it with people since after the November election that gave us this very close House. I'm of many minds on this thing, not even two minds on it. The difficulty in the U.S. House is currently constructed with our current political system, with the incentive structure we currently have. It is very difficult to have a lasting coalition in the U.S. House, and that is historic. I've spent a lot of time researching U.S. House history. I'm fascinated by it. And there's a book called The Fight for the Speakership, which I read years ago, and I read again after the November election. And it really said that we have a two-party system, and the majority party in the House elects the speaker, and that's how policy is driven. And that's where we've been for the last 150 years in the country. And, I'm of many minds on that. Maybe it'll be a chapter in a book if I actually write a book.
Apologies, my name is Jay Love. I'm a first year in the college, and I too have a question for Chairman McHenry. Given that another challenge the House will face in the coming days is what to do with the Senate Foreign Aid Bill, do you think the solution will likely be a leadership-driven one, or will some significant backbench jiggery-pokery be involved, whether that be defeating the previous question or a discharge petition or anything like that?
That's a first year, by the way. First year in college. Welcome to you, Chicago, sir.
And what's your name again?
Jay.
Last name?
Love.
All right. I'm going to see you on a ballot somewhere. Or you're gonna have a great medical practice, one way or the other.
You might be looking for a job after this.
Yeah, seriously. Wish I had that name. The leadership will have the first shot at this. And I think we'll have two bills, at least maybe three, that fund the government. I think leadership will have the first crack at it. If that goes well, they'll get a second crack at it. But the speaker or leadership in the House can only resist a majority in the House for so long. You can suspend reality or suspend gravity as Speaker of the House for a period of time, but not permanently. And I think on this issue of supporting our allies around the globe, there is a solid majority, perhaps a 2/3 majority in the U.S. House to do that. And I think that will happen this Congress. It may take a few twists and turns. My hope is that my Republican leadership will make the right decision, put it on the floor for a vote. And when they do that, it will pass, and it'll pass by a wide majority.
Can I jump in, Jen? And ask
the
chairman a question. So will you sign a discharge petition, Mr. McHenry?
I've not seen one presented, Manu. I've not seen one presented.
For that extra report,
Right.
that was the question of the day at the immediate security conference, as we know. Go ahead, sir.
Hi, my name is Max. I am a third-year student at the University of Chicago, majoring in public policy, and I have a question both for Mr. Chavez and Chairman McHenry. So right now, with like all of the discourse and dysfunction going on, especially like within Congress and the government, it's made a lot of young people, especially young like minority groups, people of color, women, LGBTQ plus people, like very unmotivated to participate in government. Just as many as it has motivated to get even more involved, there's that other side. And so my question to you guys would be, what advice do you have and what would you say to these young people who are tired and just kind of hindered from running for office, voting in elections, to make real active change?
Let me take that first. I think this is when we need you the most. Like, I hate to put that burden on you, but this is really when we need you and many others to jump in, to get involved. When it's the hardest, right? When it's the hardest moment to legislate, to create change, that is where we need energy. That's where you need a new person to come in to fill your neighbor's cup, fill that energy void that exists, right? And you never know what getting involved actually translates to. I will say, when I first got involved in politics, I was graduating college, I was exhausted, I was like, I just want to take time off. I got involved and it just gave me this energy, right? And it really propelled me to where I'm at now. And so I know you're tired, but you're way too young to be tired right now. I need you to get back in there.
Mr. Chairman, do you agree with that?
Yes, I'd frame it a little differently, which is if you like what you're getting, don't get involved. There's no need for you to get involved. If it's fine, you're living a great life, don't get involved. If you don't like what you're getting, you have an obligation to get involved. That's how our system of government works. A direct engagement from the populace, and that is what drives our government to either be better or to be worse. And, I think thinking people have a higher obligation to engage in public and in public discourse and public life and make their thoughts known. And I don't mean that in a crass way, but because you thought about this and you're concerned about it, it tells me you have an obligation now. And so follow through with that obligation and try to make the difference that you desire. That's the shape of American democracy, and that's the way our republic was structured, so that we get better over time. Not that we're good now or bad now, but we can get better over time because the populace demands that, and our government follows suit.
I think we might have time for one or two more. Go ahead, please.
Hi, I'm over here, so I'll just speak in this direction. My name is Lindsay Greenspan. I'm a first year in the college. This question is for anyone who'd be willing to take it.
I know that you spoke a lot in the beginning about social media, how it's influenced our politics right now. Do you think it would be better to cut off that spotlight, to really shut off the social media attention, if there's a way to do that, to kind of close off Congress a little bit, to take away that attention, that drive to get those likes, get those votes in that way? Or do you think it would be more prudent to increase the attention to really expose the inner workings of Congress?
Oh, I think it's better. I'll hop in, and then we'll let Manu, who spends all the time in basements. Right? And what you can see about Manu is that he is not the largest individual, but he will step in front of anyone of any size when he has the microphone.
Yes.
Manu and I physically see eye to eye. So I think he's a giant.
This is accurate.
I would say sunshine is the best disinfectant here. The American people know more about Congress right now and like it less. That should drive better behavior. And I don't think you can put technology back in the bottle. I think the way that your age group interacts with social media is healthier than the way many of your parents engage with social media, right? And so that is a whole discussion point in and of itself, right? Inappropriate posting by your parents, and you have to explain to them that the world can see it. So I think the adapting and changing to technology is taking place. I think Congress is a lagging indicator that it is taking place, that change is taking place, and we've got to catch up. We've got to catch up and improve for us to be more functional and actually deliver the results that American people demand of us.
In the great tradition of our profession, Manu, I'm going to let you have the last word.
Yes, well, thank you. Yeah, I think that social media has been a double-edged sword. I think that it's great to put, when you have information, you can tweet about it and everybody sees it immediately, and it gets information out quickly, and it can help drive the discussion, drive the news cycle, which is important which is key for reporters. And the like. The double-edged sword is that a lot of bad information can be quickly passed along social media. And as the congressman was saying, the incentive for a lot of those people in Congress who want more tweets than they do want to actually change public policy or make an impact on either a compromise or agree to compromise. It's much harder. It's much easier for them to scream from the rooftops or scream from social media about any compromise than it is to champion something that could get a backlash from the loudest voices on social media. So it is a double-edged sword. But as the congressman says, you can't put the genie back in the bottle. It is what it is, and we have to learn to live with it.
Well, this is great. Now, one of the wonderful ways that we're able to get great newsmakers like the chairman here and my friend Manu is that we promised them a hard stop at 4:30. So I really greatly appreciate your time and G being here, and also being an IOP fellow. We really appreciate all that you've been giving to us this entire quarter. It's wonderful to have both of you. I hope you both come back in person soon. And thank you so much. This has been a really insightful and interesting conversation. And thank you to all for coming out today.